The cameras were already waiting. Flashes cracked through the humid New York air like distant lightning, relentless, impatient, hungry. A crowd had formed behind the velvet barricades, murmuring, shifting, rising on toes just to catch a glimpse. Then he stepped out. John F. Kennedy Jr. didn't just walk. He arrived. Calm, composed, the kind of presence that made noise quiet itself. His dark suit fit like it had been tailored for history itself, not just his body. A faint smile touched his lips, the kind that knew exactly what it was doing to people. John, over here, look this way. He paused, turned slightly, giving them what they wanted, but never everything. Because that's how he survived. Because that's how he had always survived. From the moment he saluted his father's coffin as a child, the world had claimed pieces of him. Now, as a man, he had learned to give just enough to keep the world satisfied, while protecting what little remained his. But tonight something was different. He didn't know it yet. Across the street, half hidden behind a column, she watched. Carolyn Bessette didn't belong to the chaos. She never did. Where others leaned into attention, she leaned away from it. Minimal makeup, clean lines, effortless elegance. She didn't try to be seen. And that's exactly why people couldn't stop noticing her. Her friend nudged her. That's him, she whispered. I know, Carolyn replied softly, though her voice held no awe. Just observation. But her eyes lingered. Not on the flashes, not on the crowd, on him. There was something strange about the way he stood there, like he was both inside the moment and far away from it. Like part of him had never left a quieter place. And for a brief second, just one, his gaze drifted. It crossed the street. It found her. The world didn't stop, but something shifted. John blinked, almost imperceptibly. The crowd shouted louder, thinking they had his attention again, but they didn't. Not fully, because for reasons he couldn't explain, he noticed her. Not because she was trying to be noticed, but because she wasn't. Hours later, the city had quieted, but not completely. New York never truly slept. It just changed its rhythm. Inside a softly lit restaurant, conversations flowed like wine, smooth, layered, intoxicating. John sat at a corner table, jacket loosened, tie slightly undone. Across from him, a friend talked animatedly about politics, magazines, expectations, the usual orbit of his life. You could run someday, his friend said. You know that, right? John smirked. And become exactly what everyone expects me to be. That's not the worst thing. It is, if it's not what I want. He reached for his glass, but paused. Because she walked in. Carolyn. No announcement. No spectacle. Just presence. The kind that quietly rearranged a room. She moved with calm confidence, greeting the hostess with a small smile. Her voice was low, almost private, even in a public place. John watched. Not openly, not obviously, but enough. His friend followed his gaze. You know her. No. John said. You're staring. I'm observing. Same thing. John didn't respond. Because it wasn't the same. There was something about her that didn't fit into his world, and that made him want to understand it even more. Carolyn sat at her table, unaware, or perhaps pretending to be unaware, of the attention she had already drawn. Her friend leaned in. You okay? Carolyn nodded. Just tired. But she wasn't. Not really. There was a feeling she couldn't quite name. A quiet tension, like something had begun, but hadn't revealed itself yet. She glanced across the room. And there he was. Again. Their eyes met. This time, neither looked away immediately. No smile. No gesture. Just recognition. Like two strangers, acknowledging something neither of them understood. Later, as the night thinned and people began to leave, John stood near the exit, exchanging final words with acquaintances. Carolyn approached. Not directly, not intentionally, but the distance between them closed anyway. And then, finally, they stood face to face. For a moment, neither spoke. Then John broke the silence. Do I know you? A simple question, but his tone carried curiosity, not assumption. Carolyn tilted her head slightly. I don't think so. A pause. Then, softer, but I think you noticed me anyway. John smiled. Not the public one. A real one. Hard not to. She studied him for a second. Long enough to see past the surface, but not long enough to reveal that she had. Good night, she said. And just like that, she walked past him. No lingering, no performance, no attempt to turn the moment into something more. But somehow, that made it everything. Outside, the night air wrapped around her as she stepped onto the sidewalk. A taxi passed. The city hummed. Behind her, John stepped out too. He didn't call after her. Didn't chase. He just watched her disappear into the moving lights of New York. And for the first time in a long time, he felt something unfamiliar. Not pressure, not expectation. Something quieter. Something dangerous. Something real. Because some love stories don't begin with fireworks. They begin with a glance. A pause. A moment that feels small. Until it changes everything. The city remembered her before he did. Not her name. Never her name. But the feeling she left behind. A quiet imprint. A presence that didn't fade easily. For John, that feeling lingered longer than it should have. Days passed. Meetings, deadlines, magazine layouts, political conversations. His life resumed its usual rhythm. On the surface, nothing had changed. But beneath it, something had. Earth to John. He blinked, pulling himself back into the moment. Papers were spread across the table. His team at George Magazine sat around him, waiting. You've been staring at that page for 5 minutes, one of them said. John exhaled softly, running a hand through his hair. I'm thinking about politics, or something else. A small smirk tugged at his lips. Wouldn't you like to know? They laughed, but his mind wasn't there. It was somewhere else. A quiet restaurant, soft lighting, a woman who walked away without trying to be remembered. Across the city, Carolyn stood in front of a mirror, adjusting the sleeve of a minimalist black dress. Her apartment was calm, almost too calm. Clean lines, neutral tones, no unnecessary clutter. Her friend leaned against the doorway, watching her. You've worn that 3 times this week. Carolyn didn't look up. It works. You're hiding in it. Now she glanced over. I don't hide. Her friend raised an eyebrow. You disappear. That's different. Carolyn paused. There was truth in that, but she didn't respond. Instead, she reached for her coat. Where are you going? Her friend asked. Out. That's not an answer. Carolyn slipped on her heels. It's enough of one. But as she stepped out into the New York evening, she couldn't ignore the subtle pull in her chest. Like the city was guiding her somewhere. Or someone. It happened again. Not planned. Not arranged. Just inevitable. A bookstore this time. Quiet. Dim. The kind of place where time slowed down. John stood near the back, flipping through a book he wasn't really reading. His sunglasses rested on his head, his expression thoughtful. He came here sometimes to escape. No cameras, no expectations, just silence. Footsteps echoed softly across the wooden floor. He didn't look up immediately, but something made him, and there she was, Carolyn Bessette, standing in the aisle across from him, scanning titles with calm focus, as if the world outside didn't exist. John closed the book, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. She noticed. Of course she did. Their eyes met again. This time, there was no distance. No crowd. No noise to hide behind. Just space. And something unspoken filling it. John stepped closer, slow enough not to startle her, confident enough not to hesitate. You always appear like this, he said lightly. Or is New York just very small? Carolyn's lips curved slightly. Maybe you just go to predictable places. He chuckled. A bookstore is predictable, for someone trying not to be seen. Yes, that caught him off guard. Not because she was wrong, but because she saw it so clearly. And you, he asked, are you trying not to be seen? She considered that. then shook her head. No, I just don't need to be. Silence settled between them again, but it wasn't awkward. It was steady, like something finding its balance. They walked out together, not as a decision, just as something that happened. The city greeted them with its usual chaos. Cars rushing, voices overlapping, lights flickering. But between them, there was a strange calm. Coffee? John asked. Carolyn hesitated, not because she didn't want to, but because she understood what it meant. This wasn't just coffee. This was a step, a line crossed, and once crossed, things wouldn't stay simple. John noticed her pause. I don't bite, he added, a hint of humor in his voice. She met his eyes. I'm not worried about that. Then what? A beat. Then, quietly, you don't come without complications. Honest, direct, no sugarcoating. John nodded slowly. That's fair. And yet, he added, you're still here. She didn't answer immediately, because she didn't have a safe answer. Instead, she said, one coffee. John smiled. Just one. The cafe was small, tucked between two buildings like a secret. Warm light spilled through the windows, wrapping everything in a soft glow. They sat across from each other. No cameras, no expectations, just two people, trying to understand something that didn't make sense yet. So, John said, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly, what do you do when you're not mysteriously appearing in places I happen to be? Carolyn leaned back slightly. Public relations. He raised an eyebrow. So you manage people's images. I manage what they want people to see. And what they don't. She held his gaze. That's the more important part. A small silence followed, because that hit closer than either of them expected. John leaned forward slightly. And what do you see when you look at me? Carolyn didn't look away. Someone who's been watched his entire life. He didn't react, not outwardly, but something shifted behind his eyes. And, he asked, and someone who learned how to perform just enough to survive it. Her voice was calm, but her words weren't light. John exhaled slowly. You're good at your job. I'm good at seeing, she corrected. Another pause. Then, what do you see when you look at me? She asked. John didn't answer right away. He studied her, not her clothes, not her posture, her. I see someone who doesn't belong to the noise, he said finally. Carolyn's expression softened, just slightly. And someone who could walk away from all of this, without looking back. She looked down at her coffee, because that was true. And she didn't like how easily he saw it. Hours passed without them noticing. Conversations shifted, from light to deep, from guarded to honest. They talked about everything and nothing. Dreams, fears, the strange weight of being seen by the world, and not being seen at all. And somewhere between those words, something formed, not loud, not dramatic, but real. When they stepped outside, the night had deepened. The city felt different now, quieter, more intimate. They stood on the sidewalk, neither rushing to leave. This was a mistake, Carolyn said softly. John's brow furrowed. Didn't feel like one. That's the problem. He understood. Of course he did. Because for the first time in a long time, something felt easy. And easy was dangerous. Then don't call it a mistake, he said. Call it a beginning. She met his eyes, and for a moment, she wanted to believe that. But beginnings came with endings. And she had learned, endings weren't always kind. I should go, she said. John nodded, but he didn't step back. Neither did she. The space between them held something fragile, something unspoken. Then finally, she turned, and walked away, again. But this time, he didn't just watch her leave. He knew, this wasn't the end of the moment. It was just the start of something neither of them could stop. Because some connections don't ask for permission. They don't wait for the right time. They don't care about consequences. They just happen. And once they do, they change everything. It didn't stay quiet for long. Things like this never did. At first, it was just moments. Unplanned, unspoken, unlabeled. A walk through Central Park just before sunset, when the city softened and even the noise seemed to breathe slower. Carolyn walked beside him, hands tucked into her coat, her pace steady, never rushing to match his, yet somehow always in sync. "You come here often?" she asked. John glanced at the trees, their leaves catching golden light. "When I need to remember what normal feels like. And does it work?" He thought about that. "Sometimes," he said, "until someone recognizes me." Carolyn smiled faintly. "That must be exhausting." "It is," he admitted. "But you get used to it." She stopped walking. John took a few steps before realizing, then turned back. "You shouldn't have to get used to that," she said. There was no pity in her voice. Just quiet truth. John studied her face. "And you shouldn't be so good at seeing things people don't say." Carolyn shrugged slightly. "It keeps things simple. But nothing about this is simple," he said, gesturing lightly between them. A pause. The air shifted. "No," she agreed. "It's not." The moments turned into meetings. The meetings turned into something else. Not quite a relationship. Not yet. But close enough that it began to change them. John found himself looking for her in rooms he entered, even when she wasn't supposed to be there. Carolyn found herself staying a little longer in conversations, laughing a little easier, letting silence stretch without feeling the need to escape it. And somewhere between all that, they stopped pretending it was nothing. One evening, they found themselves on his apartment balcony. The city stretched endlessly below them, lights flickering like a living constellation. A faint breeze moved through the air, cool and grounding. Carolyn leaned against the railing, looking out. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked. John stood beside her, hands in his pockets. "Leaving what?" "All of this," she said. "The expectations, the noise, the name." He let out a quiet breath. "Every day." She turned to look at him. "So why don't you?" He met her gaze. "Because it's not just mine to leave." That answer stayed between them. Heavy, real. Carolyn looked back at the city. "I could," she said. "I know. And that scares you." John didn't deny it. "Yeah," he said softly. "It does." It happened faster than either of them expected. The shift, the moment when, almost, became something. It was raining that night. Not a storm. Just steady, quiet rain that blurred the city into reflections and shadows. They had been walking, caught without an umbrella, laughing lightly as they hurried under a building overhang. Carolyn brushed wet strands of hair from her face, her breath visible in the cool air. "This was your idea," she said. John grinned. "Worth it. For what?" "Pneumonia. For this." He didn't move closer. Not yet. But the space between them felt charged. Alive. Carolyn's smile faded. Not into discomfort, but into something deeper. "John." Her voice carried a warning. Or maybe a question. He stepped forward, just slightly. "If this is where you tell me to stop," he said quietly, "I will." She searched his eyes, looking for something. Honesty, intention, risk. She found all three. And instead of stepping back, she stayed. That was all it took. John reached up, gently brushing a raindrop from her cheek. His touch was careful, like he understood how fragile this moment was. Carolyn didn't move, didn't speak, didn't look away. And then, he kissed her, soft at first, uncertain, but real, and then deeper, as if something long held back finally broke free. The world didn't interrupt. No cameras, no voices, just rain, and the quiet sound of two people, crossing a line they both knew existed. Afterward, they stood there, close but no longer uncertain. Carolyn exhaled slowly, her forehead resting briefly against his chest. "This changes things," she said. John nodded. "I know, and not just for us. I know that too." She pulled back, looking up at him. "Then why does it feel like we didn't have a choice?" John smiled faintly. "Because maybe we didn't. But the world always catches up." It started with a glance. A photographer across the street. A moment too long. A connection too obvious to miss. Then whispers. Names mentioned together. Speculation. Have you heard about him? They've been seen. It's serious, I think. The noise began quietly, but it didn't stay that way. A week later, it exploded. Flashbulbs returned. Questions sharpened. John, is it true? Are you dating her? What's her name? Carolyn wasn't there, but she felt it anyway. Through calls, through headlines, through the sudden shift in how the world looked at her. She stood in her apartment, a newspaper folded tightly in her hand. Not because of what it said, but because of what it meant. There was no going back now. That night, John showed up at her door. No warning, no call, just presence. She opened it, already knowing it was him. You shouldn't be here, she said quietly. I had to see you. They're watching you. I don't care. She held his gaze. But I do. Silence. Then, this is what I was talking about, she said. The complications. John stepped closer. I know it's not easy. That's not the problem, she replied. It's that it's not private. Her voice didn't break, but something inside it did. John reached for her hand. She let him. For what it's worth, he said, us, it's the only thing that feels real right now. Her fingers tightened slightly around his. And what happens when the world tries to take that too? He didn't have an answer. Not a good one. But he didn't let go. Because love doesn't wait for perfect conditions. It grows in chaos. It survives in uncertainty. But it also gets tested. And as the city watched more closely, as the pressure built quietly beneath the surface, neither of them realized they had just stepped into something far bigger than themselves. Something that wouldn't just change their lives, but challenge everything they thought they could protect. The morning light cut through the blinds like a judgment. New York never truly rested, and neither could they, not anymore. John's apartment felt smaller somehow, the weight of the city pressing against the windows. The walls seemed to echo with the whispers of yesterday, the headlines, the questions. Every shadow in the room reminded him that nothing was private. Not his life, not his heart, not her. He sat at the kitchen counter, coffee untouched, staring at the mess of papers and photos spread across the table. The latest tabloid had splashed them across the cover. The golden sun finds love, but can it survive the spotlight? Bold letters. No subtlety. No mercy. He traced the edge of the photograph with his finger. Carolyn's face looked calm, serene, but it was a lie. He knew it. He could see the tension in her eyes when they were alone. He knew the part of her that hated being watched, that hated being forced into a narrative she hadn't agreed to. The phone buzzed. Text after text, friend after friend, reporter after reporter. Offers, invitations, questions, demands. He silenced it, because for the first time, he didn't want to answer. Carolyn was awake too. Her apartment felt like a fortress, but the walls didn't keep the world out, they only amplified it. Every glance at the screen made her stomach twist. Every notification made her heart pound. Every article made her doubt herself, doubt him, doubt the fragile bubble they had carved out in this city that never stopped prying. She sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, thumb hovering over the reply button. Do I even respond? The messages were polite enough, almost formal, but she knew the undercurrent: curiosity, speculation, expectation. 100 voices asking her to perform a role she didn't want to play. She let the phone fall beside her. The sound of the rain outside had returned. Soft, steady, relentless. It matched her mood. It always did. That afternoon, they met in a quiet cafe. Well, as quiet as a Manhattan cafe could be when the city thrummed just beyond the glass. John arrived first, sitting with his back to the wall, scanning the street through narrowed eyes. Carolyn entered moments later, umbrella dripping, scarf clutched tightly around her neck. She looked at him. They're already talking. He didn't need to ask who. He knew. The cameras, the whispers, the gossip columns, they were already weaving their story, and they weren't asking permission. They always do, he said, voice low. Doesn't mean it's true. But it changes things, she countered. Doesn't it? It was the truth. The world had its own agenda. And now that they were part of it, nothing could be private again. Every glance, every laugh, every small intimacy could be twisted into a headline. John reached across the table, gently covering her hand with his. We don't have to let it define us. She looked down, hesitant, aware of every passerby outside the window. How can we not? Everyone's watching. And that's why we have to, he said, steady, commanding, a hint of desperation beneath the calm. Because what we feel doesn't belong to them. Carolyn let his words linger in the air. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust him. But the world had a long memory, and so did she. The next week was a trial by fire. Photos leaked, candids taken on their walks, smiles caught on film, hands brushing in moments too subtle for casual notice but perfect for tabloid scrutiny. Every public appearance became a performance, every shared moment a story headline waiting to happen. John's friends tried to shield him. Advisors and editors whispered strategies, protective maneuvers, and media plans. But no plan could stop the relentless curiosity of a public that had long loved his family story and now projected it onto his love life. Carolyn felt it too. Every step outside became a calculation. Every elevator ride a gauntlet. Every cafe a potential trap. Her independence, the very thing that had drawn John to her, now felt like a vulnerability. And yet, in private moments, they held on to the fragile core of what they were building. One night, the tension finally broke. John's apartment was dark, except for the soft glow of the city spilling through the blinds. Rain pelted the windows with force now, a drumbeat echoing the storm inside their hearts. Carolyn sat silently on the couch, arms wrapped around herself. "They're going to ruin this," she said. Her voice was trembling, but she didn't look at him. "Who?" John asked, leaning against the doorway. His expression was calm, but his hands were tight at his sides. "Everyone," she whispered. "The world, my job, your family, the cameras, the stories, they'll never stop." John crossed the room, kneeling before her. His hands cupped her face gently, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Then we fight it together," he said. "Or we step away together. But we don't let them dictate who we are." Tears escaped her eyes. She didn't try to hide them. "I'm scared, John." "I know," he said. "So am I." And in that moment, it wasn't about the headlines, or the fame, or the expectations. It was just them, raw, vulnerable, human. The storm outside grew louder, as if the city itself was echoing the intensity of their emotions. They stayed like that for hours. Words were unnecessary. Touch was sufficient. Presence was everything. But deep down, both knew that this calm would not last. That the pressures lurking outside the apartment walls were relentless. That soon, they would be tested in ways neither of them could anticipate. And when that time came, they had no choice but to confront it together, or risk losing everything. The night ended without resolution. But it ended with a promise. The world could watch. The world could speculate. The world could try to define them. But as long as they had each other, they could resist it. For now, the tension had only begun. Because the more they hid, the more visible they became. And the closer they grew, the sharper the spotlight would shine. It started with a photograph. A simple, almost innocent image. Carolyn walking ahead of John on a quiet street, hair caught in the breeze, her scarf fluttering lightly. But in the wrong hands, innocence became scandal. By morning, the world had twisted it. Headlines screamed, secrets exposed. Kennedy romance under fire. Every detail, her expression, his stance, the distance between them, was dissected, analyzed, turned into speculation. Every glance became evidence. Every smile became motive. John stared at the news feeds, numb. His stomach churned, not with fear, but with anger. Not at the tabloids, they had always existed, but at the cruelty of turning something so intimate into fodder. Carolyn sat across from him in his apartment, arms folded, jaw tight. Her calm facade had cracked. A few strands of hair fell across her face, damp from the rain outside. "They're relentless," she said quietly. "Everywhere we go, they're there." John exhaled slowly. "I know, but we knew this would happen." She shook her head. "No, we knew the cameras would follow. We didn't expect them to invade every fragment of our lives, to twist our every gesture." Her eyes glistened. Vulnerability, raw and unshielded, stared back at him. He wanted to reach for her, hold her, promise her it would be okay, but words felt meaningless now. The following days were worse. A friend of Carolyn's from the fashion world called with concern. "Are you sure you want to keep seeing him? The press is merciless." "Of course I do," Carolyn snapped. But even as she said it, doubt lingered, uninvited, like a shadow. John's life became a careful navigation of public and private worlds. Every meeting, every appearance, every whispered rumor threatened to tear apart the fragile bond they had nurtured. And then, the first real fracture. It was a Friday evening. They had planned a quiet dinner at a discreet Italian restaurant tucked away in the West Village. Low lights, soft music, a place where they could be themselves, if only for a few hours. But it wasn't enough. Across the room, a photographer had slipped in. Just one, hidden in the corner. He snapped shots through a slightly cracked window shutter, capturing John and Carolyn laughing together, leaning close in conversation. The images would be everywhere by morning. Carolyn's hand tightened around John's. She felt the weight of the world pressing down, smothering the air between them. "I can't do this," she whispered. "What?" John asked, concern flashing across his face. "This," she said, sweeping her arm at the room, the streets outside, the constant intrusion. "Everything. Us. The attention. The pressure. I can't live like this." John's heart sank. "Carolyn, we can handle it together." She looked at him, pain and frustration in her eyes. "Together. Do you even understand what it's like? To be seen, always analyzed. I've never asked for this. I've never wanted it. And now, it's destroying me." Silence fell between them, thick and suffocating. He reached for her hand again, but she pulled away. "You don't get it," she said, voice breaking. "You've always been in the spotlight. You know how to navigate it. I don't. I never asked for this, John. And now I think it's too late." Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She stood abruptly, grabbing her coat. "I need air. I need space." John rose too, his chest tight. "Carolyn, please, don't go like this." She hesitated, looking at him one last time. "I don't know if I can stay." And then she left. John stayed behind, watching the door close, the echo of her footsteps fading into the city's relentless hum. The pain was sharp, stinging, not just because she had left, but because he knew this was only the first test. The first real crack in something he thought was unbreakable. He sank into his chair, head in his hands. The world outside continued, indifferent. Headlines updated, speculation rose. But for John, nothing mattered except the empty space she had left behind. Hours later, Carolyn wandered the rain-slick streets, alone. Each step felt heavier than the last. The city, which had once seemed full of possibility, now felt oppressive. The flashes from cameras seemed imagined, yet she knew they were real, always watching, always waiting. She paused beneath a street lamp, staring at her reflection in the puddle. A reflection of herself, but not entirely. The fear, the exhaustion, the heartbreak she felt all at once. And then she did something she hadn't allowed herself before. She called him. No words came immediately, only silence, the dial tone. Then, finally, his voice. "Carolyn." Her chest tightened. "John. Where are you?" he asked softly. Concern, anger, fear, all tangled in a single word. "I can't. I don't know if I can do this." John's grip on the phone tightened, though no one could see it. "Then we stop. We walk away together. But don't let them tear us apart from each other." Her tears fell freely now. I'm scared, John. I don't want to lose myself in this. In us. In them. We won't, he said, voice firm yet gentle. We fight it together. You and me. Always. But even as he said the words, both of them knew the truth. The fight was just beginning. And some battles weren't just fought with love, they were fought against the world itself. That night, they didn't meet. They didn't speak beyond hurried texts. But both lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearts pounding, minds racing. The photograph, the headlines, the scrutiny, it had struck like a storm. And though neither of them admitted it aloud, they both feared, storms like this didn't pass quietly. Somewhere between fear and desire, love and chaos, they were being tested. And the first fracture had appeared. The morning came like a warning. John awoke to the relentless chime of his phone. Notifications stacked like a wall. Emails, messages, headlines, social media mentions, each one louder, sharper, more invasive than the last. He scrolled through them slowly, heart sinking with every swipe. The photograph from the restaurant, the whispered rumors, the speculation, they had already been magnified, manipulated, turned into a story he didn't recognize. And now, there was something worse. A single headline stopped him cold. Kennedy romance in danger. Insider claims conflict between John and Carolyn. His stomach twisted. Insider claims. That meant someone close. Someone who had seen the private moments they'd fought to protect. Someone had betrayed them. Carolyn didn't answer his calls. Not immediately. When she finally did, her voice was distant, tight, strained. John. We need to talk. Her words made his chest tighten. Not because he feared the conversation, but because he already knew. Something had happened. Something had gone too far. He grabbed his coat and left, his mind racing through possibilities. Who, what, how much had been seen? They met at a quiet park bench near the East River, away from the usual crowd of cameras and tourists. The city hummed around them, but here, it felt momentarily distant. Carolyn sat stiffly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her eyes were red, but she had fought to keep her composure. John knelt beside her. What happened? She shook her head, struggling to find words. Someone I trusted, gave them access. To us. To everything. John's heart clenched. Who? She hesitated. I don't want to say. Carolyn, he said firmly, voice low but intense, I need to know. Tears welled in her eyes. She swallowed hard. It was someone from my team. Someone I thought had my back. They leaked details, John. Everything. Our walks, our meetings, even the private dinners. Everything. John's jaw tightened. Rage bubbled under the surface, but he kept it in check. Do you know why? She shook her head. No, but it doesn't matter. They did it. And now the world is spinning out of control. And I feel like I've lost control over myself. They sat in silence, the city's noise like distant thunder. Both understood that trust, once broken, left scars. And their world, already fragile, was splintering. John finally spoke, his voice steady but sharp. Carolyn, we can't let them win. Whoever did this, whoever betrayed us, they don't get to dictate how we live. How we love. But it's not just them, she whispered, voice trembling. It's the cameras, the media, the constant scrutiny. Every move we make is public property. Every private moment is a headline waiting to happen. How do we fight that? John reached for her hands. We fight together. And if that means cutting off people, if that means taking risks, then so be it. I'm not letting this destroy us. She looked into his eyes, searching for certainty. And if we can't, he held her gaze, unwavering. Then we fight harder. We survive. We protect each other, no matter what. But survival had a cost. Within hours, another leak hit. This one more personal. Details about their conversations, the quiet moments, and even rumors about conflicts between them. Headlines screamed accusations that neither of them had said, creating a storm of public speculation. Carolyn crumpled under the weight. I can't do this anymore, John. Not like this. It's too much. Every day, it's like they're inside my head, inside our lives, twisting everything into something we're not. John's heart shattered at her words. He had felt the same, but hearing it aloud made it real. He reached for her, trying to anchor her. Then we make it real, Carolyn. Not the stories, not the rumors. Us, you and me, we define it. She shook her head, stepping back. You don't understand. You've lived in this world. You've grown up with it. I haven't. And I'm breaking. That night, they walked in silence along the river. Rain began to fall again, soft and relentless, mirroring their internal storm. Neither spoke, both lost in thought. Every splash of water against the pavement sounded like a countdown, a reminder that the world outside would not pause for them. Then, unexpectedly, Carolyn stopped. She turned to him, eyes wide, desperate. I love you, John. But I don't know if love is enough. Not here, not now. John felt a punch to the chest. He stepped closer, his voice low, urgent. It is enough. It has to be. We've survived everything so far. Why stop now? She shook her head, tears streaming freely. Because surviving isn't living. And I want to live. But I'm not sure I can breathe with all of this suffocating us. He reached for her face, cupping her cheek. Then we fight. We fight for every breath, every heartbeat. Together. But she pulled away, trembling. I don't know if we can. And with that, she ran, disappearing into the shadows, leaving John standing alone in the rain, soaked, broken, and utterly powerless. The betrayal, the scrutiny, the relentless invasion of their lives. It had escalated beyond anything either of them had imagined. And for the first time, John felt the full weight of fear. Fear not just for himself, but for the woman he loved. The woman he could not lose. Because this storm, this was only the beginning. The city never felt colder. John paced his apartment, the hum of the air conditioner doing nothing to mask the emptiness around him. Rain had turned to a steady drizzle outside, pattering against the windows like tiny drums of warning. The apartment, usually a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. The walls pressed in, echoing with her absence. He hadn't heard from Carolyn in 2 days. 2 long, agonizing days. Every phone buzz made his heart leap, only to sink again when it wasn't her. Every news alert, every whispered rumor in the corridors of his world, reminded him she had pulled away, maybe for good. He sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. And then, the knock came. Hard, insistent. John jumped to his feet, heart racing. He crossed the room and opened the door, half expecting a reporter, half hoping it was her. But it wasn't. A young messenger handed him an envelope. No name, no return address. Just a thick, heavy envelope that smelled faintly of rain and ink. He tore it open. Inside were photographs. Not the harmless kind. These were taken during her most private moments. Walking alone, sitting in cafes, even leaving her apartment. Someone had followed her, tracked her, invaded her life. And worse, the final photo made his blood run cold. It was Carolyn, her expression frozen in terror. A shadow loomed behind her, a man barely visible, but unmistakably present. Watching. John dropped the photos, stomach twisting violently. He grabbed the phone, dialing her number with shaking hands. No answer. Meanwhile, Carolyn sat in a dimly lit apartment halfway across the city, heart pounding. She hadn't gone to John, not yet. She couldn't, not with the feeling of being hunted pressing down on her like lead. Every step outside had been calculated. Every glance over her shoulder had been real. The message she received earlier had been clear. Stop seeing him, or else. The, or else, left her trembling. And yet, the love she felt for John burned too fiercely to obey. She would have gone to him, but the fear of putting him in danger, had kept her away. She had to protect him. even if it meant breaking her own heart. John didn't know what to do. He considered calling the police, but who knew what evidence they had? Who knew how far they had gone? Every instinct told him she was in danger. Every rational thought screamed that he needed to find her immediately. Finally, he grabbed his coat, swept the photos into his pocket, and ran out into the rain-soaked streets. They met at last. Not in a cafe, not in the park, not in some neutral place. It was a rooftop, high above the city, where the wind ripped through the air and the lights below flickered like a distant, indifferent galaxy. Carolyn was there, coat-drenched, hair plastered to her face. She looked at him, eyes wide, fear and relief colliding in a storm all their own. John reached her first, pulling her into a tight embrace. She trembled against him, body shaking, heart racing. "John, they're everywhere," she whispered. "I know," he said. "But not here, not now, just here." They clung to each other as the rain pounded around them, the world below utterly insignificant. But the danger was real. Footsteps on the stairwell, a shadow moving against the door frame. John stiffened, holding her tighter. "They're coming," she breathed. "Then we leave," he said. Now, they ran, slipping through fire escapes and alleyways, rain blurring the city into streaks of light and shadow. Every corner felt like a threat, every pedestrian a potential witness. Their hearts pounded, lungs burning, but the one constant, the one reason they moved, was each other. Finally, they stopped in an abandoned warehouse near the docks. The silence was deafening. The rain drummed on the corrugated metal roof. Above them, Carolyn sank against John, exhausted, terrified. I can't keep running like this," she whispered. John held her face in his hands. "You won't have to. Not if we do this together. I'll protect you. Always." Her lips trembled. "But at what cost?" "Any cost," he said firmly. "Even if it means taking the storm for both of us." And for the first time, both of them understood the depth of their commitment. Not just to love, not just to each other, but to surviving the world that refused to let them be. As the night pressed on, they sat together in that desolate warehouse, rain pouring outside, hearts still racing. They knew one thing: the danger wasn't over. The headlines, the threats, the shadows, they would not relent. But neither would they. And in that moment, soaked to the bone, fear and love intertwining, they shared a vow unspoken but absolute: no matter the storm, no matter the cost, they would face it together. Even if it destroyed everything else. Dawn broke over the city like fragile hope, pale and trembling, brushing the wet streets with soft gold. The storm from the night before had left the air clean, sharp, almost cruelly quiet after the chaos. John and Carolyn stood on the rooftop of the warehouse one last time, the world below slowly waking, indifferent to everything that had happened. Their coats were still damp, hair matted, hands intertwined like lifelines. Neither spoke at first, only the sound of their breathing filling the empty space. Finally, Carolyn whispered, her voice raw, "Do you ever think, maybe we were never meant for this world?" John shook his head gently. "No, we were meant for each other. That's enough." She looked at him, searching, trying to find certainty in the man who had been her anchor through so much chaos. "But what about everything else? The cameras, the rumors, the danger, it doesn't stop." He pulled her closer. "I know, but love isn't about waiting for perfect conditions. It's about holding on, even when the world tries to pull you apart. Even when it's impossible." Her eyes filled with tears. Not fear this time, but something deeper. Relief, gratitude, and a love so fierce it hurt. "I don't want to lose you," she said, voice breaking. "You won't," he whispered, brushing a tear from her cheek. "I swear." For a long moment, they just held each other, the city stretched beneath them like a silent witness. The sun rose higher, casting light over skyscrapers, streets, and rivers, but neither noticed. Time had collapsed. Nothing existed except the two of them. Later, they walked together through the quiet streets, rain puddles reflecting their faces as they moved. No one was around. No cameras, no whispers, no intrusion. Just John, just Carolyn, just their love, raw and unfiltered. They paused at a small bridge overlooking the river. Carolyn leaned on the railing, and John stood beside her, shoulder touching hers. The water below was dark, restless, but somehow peaceful. I was so afraid, she admitted softly. Afraid I'd be swallowed by it all. Afraid I'd lose myself, lose you. You never could, John said firmly. You're stronger than any storm, Carolyn. And we've already survived so much together. That's proof. She laughed quietly, a sound that trembled at first but grew steadier. Proof that we're reckless, she teased, then looked up at him, eyes shining. And maybe a little crazy. Definitely a little crazy, he agreed, a faint smile breaking through the tension that had held them for weeks. But perfect for each other. And then, unexpectedly, he reached for her hand, holding it with all the weight of his heart. No more running, he said softly. No more hiding. We face the world together. From now on, whatever comes. Carolyn's heart swelled. She nodded, pressing her forehead against his. Together, she whispered. They kissed then, not the tentative, uncertain kiss of the past, but one filled with fire, relief, and unshakable certainty. It was a kiss that said, we've survived the impossible, and now nothing can take this away. Hours passed as they lingered there, talking quietly, sharing secrets and laughter and fears they had never voiced before. The city below moved on, oblivious to the love that had been tested and hardened above it. By midday, they descended from the rooftop, hands still entwined, faces streaked with rain and smiles alike. They were exhausted, yes, and scarred by the storms they had faced, but unbroken. And in that moment, the world seemed to pause, if only for a heartbeat. John looked at Carolyn, eyes filled with an intensity that was almost frightening in its sincerity. No matter what happens, he said, I will always fight for us. Always. Carolyn's hand tightened around his. And I will fight for us too, she said, even when it's hard, even when it's terrifying, always. The final shot of the day captured them walking down the empty street, shoulder to shoulder, the morning sun breaking through clouds, reflecting in the puddles like tiny worlds of hope. The camera might fade, the headlines might scream, and the world might always try to intrude, but they had something untouchable. Something that no photograph, no whisper, no shadow could ever take. Their love, unyielding, fierce, eternal. As they disappeared into the city, hands still intertwined, hearts still beating in unison, the story didn't end. It simply began anew, a love that had survived the impossible and emerged brighter than the storms that had tried to drown it. And for John and Carolyn, that was all that mattered. The end.